From Mountain Home to Raft River, we've got all the District 4 analysis you'll need to know. This is the Magic Valley Prepcast with Scott Burton.
That's right. It's time for another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com. You can get this podcast audio-wise each and every week wherever you download your podcasts, as well as IdahoSports.com. You can also watch the video of this Prepcast on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page. Brandon Baney here with Scott Burton. Scott, you're donning the Dodgers jersey today. LA Dodgers represent.
Oh, hey, you know it, man. Half game back of the Giants now after a win last night. 30 games left in the season. It's time to get serious.
And they're done playing the Giants this year, right?
I think they've got a big series coming up. They've got San Diego coming up. And I'd have to look at their schedule to be sure. But, they got a couple of NL West series coming up there, which are going to be huge. So,
for sure.
I got to get my guy Bellinger going. That's whose jersey I got, and he's like, one for like 1,000.
Yeah, that's for sure. And so, you're a big baseball fan, of course, Dodgers fan. Now, football, you like the LA Rams as well, right?
I'm a Rams, Lakers, Dodgers guy, and the quick story behind that is I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I walk into, the living room. My parents are watching a football game, and I was one of those kids that knew my sports teams before I knew my alphabet. And I walk in and they're watching the Rams and the Falcons play. And I walked up to the TV and I just kind of was captivated by the Rams helmet at like 5 or 6 years old. And I go, "Who's that?" They go, "Those are the Los Angeles Rams." I go, "Well, that's going to be my team." And I never changed. I'm loyal to a fault. But then in my little, mind, I'm thinking, well, they're the Los Angeles Rams. I guess I need to like the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Los Angeles Kings. And I hate LA. The town. It's a mess. But all their teams I've liked since I've been like a little kid. So go Dodgers.
Yeah, that's good synergy. I feel like I'm talking to my dad here because he likes all the LA teams as well. So we're well versed in Dodgers, Rams stuff in my house too. So right. Well, speaking of football, not NFL football, but high school football, Scott, holy smokes. We had a great week 1. It was nice to see everybody back on the field.
Oh, it is. It's so cool when you finally get going. You can start to see things take shape. And what everybody does after that first week is they go right back to the previews. And then everybody's like predictions. Did we get this right? Are we on the right track? How are things shaping up? And so now that things are starting to unfold, there are some surprises out there, but there's also, we kind of knew that was going to happen as well.
Yeah, real quick, speaking of the picks and the predictions, I want to let everybody know that this year at IdahoSports.com, we're bringing back our Gridiron game picks. You can find that on the homepage at IdahoSports.com right now. I know that's been one of our most popular features in the past. We didn't do it last year, obviously, because of COVID-19. It just wreaked so much havoc on the schedule. And then this year, we wanted to give ourselves a cushion week where we didn't unveil it last week for the full slate of games because we wanted to double check and make sure that COVID wasn't going to rear its ugly head again. And with the exception of a game or two, we really have been able to proceed as normal. So we thought, okay, looks like we're going to have a somewhat normal season. We'll bring back the Gridiron game picks. You go up, you sign up for a profile on IdahoSports.com, takes 2 seconds. And from there, you pick every single game in the state of Idaho. And if you get the most picks correct, you win $25, some cold hard cash. You get to maybe prove that you're smarter than the so-called experts from IdahoSports.com. It's a lot of fun, Scott.
Yeah, it is. It's a great time. The best part about that is, a couple of guys in the pool. You get a couple side bets going. A lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. So this will give you all of the insider info you need to know about those Magic Valley specific matchups before you fill out your Gridiron game picks. And again, that's at IdahoSports.com. So let's revisit the week that was in the Magic Valley. Let's start in the Great Basin Conference because that's where a lot of the compelling games were. We had on Friday night, IdahoSports.com, we had the broadcast of Mountain Home against Burley, a conference game to open up the season, and ended up being a really good game. Mountain Home wins 28-21 in a tight one.
Yeah, we talked about that one prior to as kind of a big question mark. We didn't know really kind of how that was going to shake out. I mean, you look back at the previous season, and Burley was able to score some points last year. In Mountain Home, we knew they were going to bring back a little bit of size, and so the 28-21 win for Mountain Home was really dictated by the size advantage that Mountain Home has, especially on the D line. The D line, they've got a couple of guys there that can really get some things done. I mean, Clark and Swenson are as good as it gets in the conference, and what that does is it just changes what you have to do offensively, because all of a sudden you're paying attention to these two guys that are demanding, double teams half the time, and when you've got that 1-2 punch, that makes it tough, to score points and to really kind of get a push on the offensive line. And so really the difference there, at least in my opinion, were those two guys on the D line.
Yeah, and I think we saw that Burley maybe has a little juice to what they're doing as well. Mountain Home got up 28-0. Burley came storming back in the second half, and the Bobcats actually had a chance at the game-tying touchdown on a fourth down pass to the end zone. The pass was dropped, and that ultimately was the difference. But I think Burley might be a little bit better than we thought as well.
I agree. I think Burley turned some heads. I think when they fell down 28-0, people were like, well, here we go again. But Burley showed a little bit of kind of moxie coming back, and have a chance to win that was, that's got to give you a little shot in the arm moving forward that, hey, we've got something here. We might be a surprise. And, talking to the Mountain Home coaches, they said the same thing. They go, Burley might surprise some people this year.
Yeah, so that was a good way to get the season started for both teams, even though it was a loss for Burley. I think they built a lot of confidence. The other Great Basin 7 conference matchup, we had two conference games right out of the gate. You had Wood River against Canyon Ridge. Those were the two teams picked to finish 7th and 6th in the preseason coaches poll. Wood River comes away with a very narrow 14-13 win, and they're 1-0.
Right, and having Wood River not really play a season last year, they had two games. And who knew how they were going to respond? Were they going to be so out of sync because they just hadn't played? Or were they going to be able to get it together and be hungry enough to fight and claw for a win? And then Canyon Ridge with their new coach, what were they going to do? How's things going to look there? So, this was although it was a preseason 6 versus 7, there was some interest there on kind of how things were going to shape up. And, as it turned out, that game really boiled down to special teams. The Conrad Foster, Wood River's kicker, he was 2 for 2 on the extra points. But other than the squib that they had at the end of the game, his kickoffs were in the end zone. So Canyon Ridge got no return. And he also had 2 punts over 50 yards. And he also made a touchdown saving tackle, and so you look at kind of Wood River's success. It came from an unlikely place. But they were able to get it done, and they scored the go-ahead touchdown with 25 seconds remaining. And when you do those kind of things after being out of the I guess the football scene for so long, there's a little excitement up in Wood River, a little bit of confidence too. It's kind of fun to see.
Yeah, it's really nice to see after everything they went through last year to get that exciting win, get a little shot in the arm for their program. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's pretty tremendous. The next game that really turned heads, I think, was a non-conference game. Twin Falls is a team that was picked to finish second in the Great Basin Conference this year. Valley View was a team that was picked to finish 4th in the SIC, and I think a lot of people statewide, or at least over there in the Treasure Valley, have the perception of, well, our 4th best team is better than your conference champion, right? Because Boise Metro were so strong. Well, I'll tell you what, Twin Falls really took it to Valley View and won 28-14, and I thought that was a great win for the Bruins.
Oh, it's a huge win for Twin Falls. It's the first opening win in 3 years, at Twin Falls, and it's their first home opening win in 6 years. So, to start the season on a positive note for Twin Falls is something they haven't done in a little bit of, in a while. In the last 3 years, Twin Falls is 1-7 against non-conference opponents. So something had to give at some point, and finally Twin Falls broke through. And they've got some talent over there. There's somebody that's going to make some noise. Valley View hung close, but it was in that third quarter where Valley View started to put a drive together. I believe it was over an 8-minute drive, marched right down the field, and Twin Falls got a turnover, and that just really took a lot of the wind out of the sails of Valley View, and Twin Falls was able to just kind of take control from there. But for the Bruins, man, that's exactly what they needed to get their season started. Otherwise, they're fighting uphill again.
Yep, and they'll be right in the mix. People seem to think, along with Minico. The Spartans start the year 2-0. They're the preseason favorites in the conference. They had a nice win. We talked about they opened up week 0 against Century, which is always tough because you're basically playing a varsity game with the minimum number of practices you can have before a game. They looked a lot better last week in a 26-8 win over Bonneville.
Yeah, Minico is. I mean, you're 2-0, and I mean, you can criticize all you want, but you're still 2-0, and right now Minico's winning ugly in certain areas. There's some things they've got to clean up, but you think about it, if they're doing it this way, imagine what they could be when they got it together, defensively, Minico was outstanding, 3 turnovers, their O-line stepped up a little bit, were a little bit more physical. There's still some issues in the passing game that Minico has to get figured out. They had problems the first week, some drop passes this time around, and so there's some issues there to work on. But the thing that Minico really has to work on is their penalties. I mean, it's 2 games in a row that Minico has been flagged for nearly 100 yards in penalties. And those things are going to come, but they're still winning ball games. And Minico is they're good. Don't get me wrong, but once they get things cleaned up over there, they're going to be really tough.
Yeah, might take it up a level once they get some of those smaller things cleaned up. Yeah. Jerome, the final team in the Great Basin, they actually played Gooding, which is a 3A SCIC school, but Gooding is pretty consistently been ranked in the top 5 in both the preseason and regular season media and coaches polls. Everybody thinks the Senators are going to be pretty good this year. This was a low-scoring game. Gooding came away with a 14-9 victory.
Yeah, Jerome was up 9-0 late in the second half. I mean, they are holding Gooding, the big, powerful, strong Gooding team, to a goose egg on the scoreboard. I mean, they're getting all the breaks. They're flying to the football. They're outplaying Gooding, and this was a game that I think a lot of people saw Gooding just absolutely walking all over Jerome. And I think Jerome surprised themselves. And so they walked out of there going, my goodness, we didn't get blown out. We may have something here, but Gooding's Gooding, and they're going to find a way to win. And they did that. They scored a couple of late touchdowns. Curtis Atkinson for Gooding was, fantastic. 8 of 14, 133 yards through the air, but 22 carries, 129 yards, and a couple of scores. And people are looking at Colston Loveland, the Michigan guy. What was he? How many was he going to score 7 touchdowns? Was he going to be a video game? No, he wasn't offensively. Offensively, he was pretty much held in check. Defensively is where he shined. I mean, he had 10 tackles, 5 of them for loss, 3 sacks, a blocked field goal. That's what your athlete's going to do. And in the end, it was almost a bigger, faster, stronger, maybe not faster, but bigger and stronger for sure, that came away with the win.
Yeah, for Gooding, I think a big key for them will be how do we figure out what plan B, plan C, plan D is when Colston Loveland is neutralized offensively, and maybe Atkinson isn't getting those runs that he is used to. So, and for Jerome, I think that, like you said, that's a big positive. I think the Great Basin Conference is going to be really competitive this year. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
It'll be interesting to see because you do have, the power game in Minico. You do have, a pretty good skill set in Twin Falls. And then you just kind of have the grit of Jerome, that could make some noise, do something. But, it'll be interesting. We need a couple more weeks to kind of see how this thing takes shape.
Yeah, that's for sure. So let's talk more about the SCIC. It was kind of a tough week for the conference, not a ton of wins. I think another game that was probably really surprising to a lot of people was Kimberlee making the trip over to Blackfoot to play Snake River. This was a rematch from last year's playoff opener when Kimberlee scored a touchdown late, and that propelled them on a nice little playoff run. But Snake River, 57-40, they defeat Kimberlee. We know the Bulldogs have skill players galore, but if they can't stop anybody, it might be a long season.
Well, that's the thing. Kimberlee never got a stop. Defense was optional for both of these teams. And it was video game statistics across the board And, Kimberlee kind of had their eyes open just a little bit. It's like, holy crap, we have got to get it together defensively or we could have a long season. And, I think Kimberlee's been touted with all this speed and the skill positions that they have on offense. But when it comes down to it, and Kimberlee did not get any, but, they were able to produce over 400 yards of offense. Offensively, Heath Owens was 28 of 44 for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns in a losing effort. Also had a rushing touchdown. Gatlin Bear, 9 catches, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a kickoff return for a touchdown. Laughlin, 10 catches, 137 yards and a touchdown. Whitmire, 10 carries and a touchdown. I mean, all of that in a losing effort. Yeah, fine. You're going to put up 40 points and you're still going to lose by 17. Yeah, you got some issues you need to work out. And the knock on Kimberlee right now is in the trenches. Are they going to be able to handle the physicality up front? But the offset to that is they've got so much speed on the outside. If they can just get rid of the ball, get it out, whatever, that's the only way they're going to be able to offset that lack of experience they have on the inside. And so that leads to some interesting defensive coverages you're going to see, from defenses trying to corral in Kimberlee into maybe getting it away from their speed guys and forcing them to run the ball. Who knows? So, yeah, Kimberlee's really interesting right now. It'll be interesting to see what they do next week against Jerome, or this week against Jerome.
Yeah, see how they respond there for sure. Filer, they've got a brand new head coach and Justin Brandsma, kind of a younger guy, and they had a tough opponent right out of the gates, North Fremont. Now that's a 2A school, but they were one play away from playing for the 2A championship last year. They were a semifinalist team. They bring back a lot of good players. They're a team that expects to be in the mix for the 2A title again. In a one-score game, North Fremont did win, but it was only 34-27.
Yeah, and the thing for Filer is they're going to have to figure out how to stop the run. I mean, there were 412 rushing yards for North Fremont. And, North Fremont is good. I mean, the Huskies are a legit 2A football powerhouse. And so, they're going to run the ball on people. I mean, they're not going to throw it a ton. So you better figure out how to stop the run. And Filer, they were actually, they had the lead. North Fremont was down by 7 with 10 minutes left in the fourth. And so for Filer to hang around and start their season competitively, that does gives them some momentum moving forward. And, North Fremont only scored on a 65-yard, it was a 65-yard counter, I believe, that did it. So it was a big play. It wasn't a sustained drive. They just gave up a big play in the fourth quarter, and that was the whole difference. But for Filer and their young coach, I do think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and a positive sign for sure. And then Buell, they've got a kind of a new quasi-old coach, Alan Reynolds, back at Buell, and they had a tough matchup right out of the gates against Weiser, a 3A title favorite. The Wolverines won 35-6. We'll see what Buell can do in their next contest. 2A, Declo looks strong as ever. They're one of the handful of teams in the 2A that can contend. They were a semifinal team last year. They shut out West Jefferson 42-0. Pretty good start.
Oh, man, they rushed for 477 yards in that game. I mean, that's insane. 37 attempts, 477 yards, only 7 passing attempts. So it's like, you know what, we're going to run the football. West Jeff, stop us. And they did not. And so Declo, coming out of the gates, they look really tough in that game. And they can continue to run the ball and get big plays like they did. And they caused 3 turnovers on the defensive side of things as well. That was a solid effort by Declo.
Yeah, the biggest thing for them will be continuing to do well in the non-conference because their league is so small and they are kind of head and shoulders above the other 2 programs in their district. So that'll be interesting to watch as Declo goes along. And then our 1As, I feel like the conversation in 8-man football always has to start with Cary. They, of course, looked really good against Garden Valley, a 52-0 shutout. Hey, this just in, Cary's probably going to be pretty good again this year.
Yeah, Cary does what Cary does. They just steamroll people. And, the only thing is that, man, you want to see them get challenged. because you want to see them get battle tested, but Cary is just so stinking good that they're going to boat race people all season long and then get challenged when they get into the playoffs. So, for Cary, it's about keeping focused on getting better and not getting focused on the score, because you see teams like that just really breeze through their schedule and they have a little false sense of security. And, Cary and their coaching staff, they do a good job of keeping those kids grounded, because, it's easy to do when you're blowing teams out 52-0, that you're like, oh, hey, we're pretty dang good. We don't need to do this. We don't need to work here. Whatever. But that would be the only weakness right now for Cary is that side of things.
Speaking of big blowouts, Raft River was competing in the 8-man classic against Clearwater Valley. That's two teams that a lot of people think are going to be in the playoffs this year for the 1A D1 ranks. And that was a big dominant win for Raft River, 48-0. They looked really strong out of the gate. Yeah,
they did. I mean, Raft River, they've got some depth, and that's going to be huge for them because they can get fresh guys in there all the time. I mean, they rotated guys in, and those guys made big plays after another, a scoop and score, strip sacks, and they shut down Pickering, for Clearwater Valley, who was one of those players that, Clearwater Valley is supposed to be good. They're going to need Pickering to step it up, but obviously he can't do it alone. Raft River had no issue with him at all. And so, Raft River, exact same boat as Cary. Pay attention to getting better, not the score.
Yep. And the other teams that were competing at the 8-man classic from the Magic Valley, I thought all looked impressive. Lighthouse Christian fell to Kendrick 42-36, but I think the Lions showed that they've got plenty of big play potential. Still, they hit on a couple of huge plays right before halftime. Glens Ferry lost to Prairie 48-14, but I was talking to Logan Green, who was broadcasting that game for us for IdahoSports.com, and he said he thought Glens Ferry actually looked pretty good. They were a play or two away from making that a closer game, and he went so far as to say that he thinks Glens Ferry could even leapfrog Lighthouse Christian for third place in the district this year. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. And then, of course, Oakley, the defending 1A D1 champs, they were in kind of a shootout with Lapway. They ended up winning 54-34, but they had to really score late to put away Lapway. So
yeah, they do. I mean, Lapway is just Lapway. They are filled with athletes, and they're not necessarily football players or basketball players or tracks. They're just athletes that can do it all there, and they're going to give people problems. And Oakley, I think it was a good opening game for Oakley. Oakley is a powerhouse, and they got punched in the mouth a little bit and kind of had to figure out how to win that ball game, and they did. I mean, 54 points is huge, but they gave up 34 as well. So a good, solid win for Oakley, and it's going to be an interesting season down here with these smaller schools in the valley, because there are some good teams.
Yep, for sure. Other highlights from the 8-man slate: Castleford, we've talked about, will be pretty solid. We think they shut out Chalice 64-0. Dietrich's the defending 1A D2 champs. They beat Rimrock 52-8. You had the annual battle for the wagon wheel. Murtaugh defeated Hanson 62-26. Hagerman and Shoshone are playing kind of these hybrid varsity JV schedules where it's half and half. They both got varsity wins on Friday. Hagerman beat Greenleaf Friends 50-26, and then Shoshone beat Mackey 26-6. So overall, I mean, it was a pretty good opening weekend for the Magic Valley, Scott.
Oh yeah, the Magic Valley really did well, especially in the 1As and 2As. I mean, we got some good teams down here, and they're putting up points. So once we get to that postseason, I hope we see a lot of these teams in the playoffs.
For sure. Let's quickly look at the upcoming games and some that stand out on the schedule. To me, right away, there's a ton in the 4A Great Basin Conference, including another conference game here in week 2, 1-0 Mountain Home versus 1-0 Wood River. Somebody's going to be 2-0 in the league after this game, Scott.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you would have said that Wood River or Mountain Home would be 2-0 after the first 2 games. I mean, not looking at who they're playing and stuff like that. You're like, holy cow, somebody's doing something right. And that game will be really interesting because, again, Mountain Home's size on the defensive line is something to be reckoned with. Wood River, coming off a big win I still think the advantage on this one is Mountain Home. I'm not a bookie by any means, but I'd say Mountain Home's got the advantage on this one. But it'll be an interesting game for sure, and obviously some, starting to sort out the pecking order in the Great Basin.
Yep, a little bit more separation here in week 2. You've got Minico traveling for the first time this year. They're going to Middleton, who looked really good. That should be a fun matchup. You've got Twin Falls hosting Pocatello. The Thunder are 1-0, and they looked pretty good at the Rocky Mountain Rumble. And then you've got Jerome for the second time in 2 weeks playing an SCIC opponent. So a lot of good non-conference action in the Great Basin as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this is what the cool thing is about the Great Basin schedule minus Wood River Mountain Home, is that most of us have got first 3 games of non-conference just to kind of get it figured out before we head into conference play. And so after that 3rd week, that's when all of the guesswork really starts to happen. It's like, okay, now we're heading into conference. What's going to happen here? So with Twin Falls playing Pocatello, they're going to get challenged. And Minico has definitely got a challenge going on the road to Middleton, and then, of course, Jerome playing Kimberlee with all their speed. Kimberlee could easily put up another 50 if Jerome's not careful. So, yeah, there's a lot of this is the cool thing about the non-conference schedule, is that it functions as a preseason, and this is where you kind of fill out your team and like, okay, what do we got to work on, and hope by the end of game 3 you've got it fixed.
Yep. And then at the 2As, Declo hosts Aberdeen. That's a pair of 1-0 teams. Aberdeen was a playoff team last year. I did that game Friday night where they beat American Falls, and they got a pretty good running attack. Aberdeen does. So we'll see what Declo can do there. And then at the lower, the lower levels, the 1As, Lighthouse Christian is going to go to Butte County. Cary hosting North Gem. That's 2 teams I think could be pretty good this year. They're both 1-0. Castleford's going to host Water Springs, which should be a good matchup. And then I think Glenn's Ferry has a good chance to maybe get their first win of the year as they travel to Idaho City. So the lower levels, we got good contests as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You got a couple of 1-0 teams going against each other, and a couple of teams that blew out other teams, in the opening week. Let's see how they respond against a better competition.
Yep, for sure. Well, it's going to be another jam-packed schedule full of high school action, football, soccer, and volleyball this week. We'll be here to break it down for you next week on the Magic Valley Prepcast. We'll see if the Magic Valley can keep that hot streak going, Scott.
Yeah, we will. So we'll be talking next week about how great we are moving into week 3.
That's right. Sounds like a game plan. So thanks for tuning into this week's edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast. For Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Bainey on IdahoSports.com.